A good afternoon and welcome to all our viewers to Wild Earth Live at the Waterhole. And I'll be your host this afternoon, Jaapie Potgieter. I'm very excited to be joining the team here. And this afternoon, we're starting off at Tau Game Lodge at Madikwe Game Reserve. And we can see over here we've got a couple of zebras. It seems to be moving away. Always interesting to see zebras out in the middle of the day when it's hot. What a interesting landscape we have here. It's quite dry, especially this time of the season. August, early September is when things are really getting tough for animals. And that's when watering holes are so important. Surface water, you have a whole bunch of animals moving here, especially like the zebra. They would come down this time of the day. It's usually a little bit more safe. From experience, they know that the predators will be a little bit inactive and laying in the shade. It's also when things get interesting. We can see there's a little bit of green grass there where the water is. So at least there's still something. There's some wildebeest. I was actually just wondering. These are two of the very well-known customers to be coming down to watering holes this time of the day. Good afternoon, Ari. Thank you very much. Greetings all the way from the Netherlands. I'm sure we'd be looking at a different weather scene in the Netherlands currently. Now, when I look there between all those white rocks, I can see, well, there looks like there's quite a lot of other colored darker rocks, but there's also quite a lot of animal dung on the ground. These little patches, they look like gray or brownish rocks and they're scattered. And that's just an indication of how busy this watering hole is. It's nice and open. We can see these wildebeest just walking right along the edges of the thicker vegetation. They'll often use the same pathway to and from the watering hole, close to the areas where they'll be spending the day grazing, where their food is. And that's also, in a way, part of a survival strategy. That way, the longer they're out in the open, they can use their excellent eyesight also to scan for any predators. And we have some ducks. Now I can see all the wildebeest just gathering, regrouping, having a moment's pause. Making sure that everybody catches up just before they move back into the denser area. It's quite a sizable herd. See that one zebra walking past them. Maybe these wildebeest are just giving the zebra the go-ahead to try and brave the game path to the grazing grounds first. Now you can see currently with almost no green vegetation in the background, I think these wildebeest are blending in very, very well with their surroundings. It's quite a often I hear people describe them as being quite drab in color, like a dull grey. And when they're standing like that, and everything else in the surrounding area is also kind of like a dull grey, then it's not so bad. It actually helps quite well. Spencer, thank you for your question. How did I get into guiding? Oof, I think it was a situation where I've always wanted to. I've always wanted to work in the bushveld. Always wanted to work out in the wilds, and yeah, I didn't know how to get into guiding. So, even though it's quite a popular thing, especially nowadays, um, I didn't really know where to go and what to look for. So after school, I did a number of other things, and including studying various different fields, and then eventually, what I deem quite late, a friend of mine that was guiding suggested that I try it out, and he put me in contact with a training organization, and from there, that's how my career started, and that's almost 9 years ago. And I've never looked back since. Ooh, there we have some elephants coming down. What a sight. I can see 3, 4 individuals with clear, distinguishable size differences. The big one on the right is almost certainly, or I'm very sure that might be a nice big bull. The others I'll have to have a better look at, but it might be a small group, maybe a female and 2 offspring. That's amazing. These massive creatures just kind of stepping out of the grey into the open. Now these creatures could have come from very, very far, and they will travel massive distances for water, especially this time of the day. But it should be interesting. I'm hoping that we might get to see. They often, once they get closer to the water, they get very excited and they might even speed up. from where I am now, it looks like they're slowing down a little bit just on the edge. Maybe they might just take a moment's notice and see what's happening around. Now that looks like two young ones, that's for sure. And judging from the size and the lack of tusks in the younger of the two, I'd say there's sufficient age difference between them to be related or offspring from the same mother. Good afternoon, Alana. That's a very good question. Is it true if you can tell if an elephant is male or female from their temples? From their temples, I'd say you could probably. Personally, what I would use is the forehead of the animal, and you can see the way, there's a bit of a shake. So from the way that animal that's just shook its head was looking, you can see from an angle, usually when you look at the animal from the broad side, you can see with the females it's got more or less like almost like a 90-degree angle to the forehead. And then with this one, the bigger male on the right, you can clearly tell the head's a little bit more rounded at the top of the forehead. But the temples, depending on the age, you can certainly tell the age of an animal from the temples. The older they are, the bigger they are. The temples often get a little bit deeper. And I guess you could use it with a very big male elephant. If it's very old, you can definitely tell if it's a male from very deep sunken temples. But I've seen some very old female elephants that's also got quite deep temples. And for me personally, the most reliable way to tell is the shape of the forehead. There are other ways. For instance, now that we have a clear view of all of these animals, you can see the difference between the male and female, the female being the one on the left and the male on the right. It's a general size difference. The male's got a much more rounded, large head and then a very broad base at the trunk. That space between the tusks, usually once a male becomes more mature, that space grows quite broad, especially from about 35 to 40 years of age. It broadens up nicely. Oh, there's another elephant. I saw earlier when that bigger male approached this small group, the female shook her head while she was standing still. And I guess she was just telling him to keep his distance. I don't think they were necessarily traveling together. You often find that the male elephant that roams through an area and picks up the scent of a herd or a group of females might actually follow them to join up with them. In this case, they have a similar interest, which is coming down to the water to drink. You can see that younger elephant can hardly wait to get to the water. So the other elephant that's just moved away from the water seems like a bull as well. And interesting, he took a moment's notice in this group and then kept on moving in the direction of the other one. So let's have a look and see what's happening here. There we go. You can see the excitement of getting to the water. There's just a quick test. Interesting to see how deeply they sunk into this mud. Now, the mother of these two clearly looking out for them, taking the first steps in and just testing the water, so to speak. Interesting to see them moving away from the edges towards the deeper areas. Now she's back up on a little ridge. I think it might be moving away probably to an area where it's less accessible to all the other animals coming down. Because often what you find is on the edge of the watering hole where the animals come down to drink all the wildebeest, the other things. I see there's a waterbuck or two there in the background. You often find that the animals muddy up the water, and there's so much mud stepped into the edge from the sides of the dam or the waterhole, and it's often you have animals slipping in, and that all muddies up the water. And elephants in general, they are creatures that prefer clean water should they have access to it. I mean, they've got very, very high water requirements being such a large animal, but they will certainly drink whatever's available. They're quite resourceful creatures. Now you can see the other male elephant have joined up with the one that initially came with that group. And I can see there's a little bit of a difference in size in the tusks of these two. The one trailing behind's got slightly larger tusks. Might even be a slightly larger elephant. So it would be interesting to see what these two do. They're just going to drink. Like often you find that they might have a little bit of an interaction and maybe even a little bit of test of strength. And that one's just seeming to cool himself down. He's definitely not drinking there. It looks like some nice loose muddy water there. And the other one's just standing and checking the situation out. Anime, are you scared that they might get stuck in the mud? Well, it's not entirely impossible. I have heard and I've also seen elephant, especially young elephant, get stuck in the mud. However, to be honest, according to my knowledge, it's quite a rare thing to happen. An elephant is quite well adapted for muddy conditions and wet conditions. And one of those adaptations, besides their sheer size and strength, is they've got very broad, flat feet. It not only serves to spread their big bulk evenly, but it also aids them in moving through these muddy patches. You'll often find in areas that forms marshy sections during the rain season, when it's very wet, the elephants go through there and They're almost the only animals that really move through there, and they make these deep, deep holes that their tracks leave behind. And when it gets covered by the grass afterwards, you don't see it. If you have to go walking through there, then you often end up stepping into these deep, hidden, very deep hidden holes. Spas Yankov, I have not been to Madikwe before, unfortunately. I would very much like to go there. And I think these elephants are amazing. They are such a huge, huge creature. And it's always one of the most humbling experiences, in my opinion, to be near one. Even a young elephant, but especially the big bulls. And here we've got two prime specimens. This is quite interesting. See a huge elephant bull like that just go down into the mud. You can see just by the mouth, the tip of the trunk's out of the mud, just to make sure that the elephant breathes. But that looks amazing. Yo, these are two prime specimens here. It's very difficult to tell for sure, but now that we have a very good view of both of these elephants' heads and their tusks, especially an elephant with larger tusks, often that space between them at the base of the trunk looks a little bit less broad. But another feature also is, like, as they grow older, the tusks seem to almost like not just move out to the side, but also a little bit up. And although that elephant to the right's got slightly larger or longer tusks, I'm inclined to think in this case that this one in the mud might be the older of the two here. Also the general size of its head. Maybe in that case that might be why the other one's just standing on the bank and not actually coming in and interacting with the one in the water. Oh, well, maybe I spoke too soon. Phew, it must be such a good feeling to be covered completely with mud like that on art day. There's also usually no time to this. They don't necessarily have to rush anyway, other than to the waterhole when they're thirsty. Once again, we can see where the elephant on the right is also just the tip of his trunk outside of the mud. What I find amazing is when these two bulls came down initially, this watering hole didn't seem so deep, but For that elephant to, even though he's laying down, to be covered almost halfway up his body, that must be a hugely deep mud pool, that. Oh, it looks like there's a black crake on the edge of the water there, between the two elephants. Not a bird that you often see out in the open like that. It looks like he's chasing after some things. Not sure what it might be, maybe flying insects along the edge of the water. So we can see some of the wildebeest in the background is now starting to move. The rest of the group actually managed to settle down there, and whatever zebra was not gathered there or with the rest of their group has also seemed to be caught up with them. Well, it seems like these two elephants are now just standing still, enjoying a bit of sun while cooling down. So while this happens, we're going to move off to the Africam at Elephant Tembe Park and see what's happening there. Oh wow, what a different picture. You still see some greenery there. That is pretty amazing. And quite a few impala right on the water's edge, even with their backs to the water. You can see as you move away from the water's edge, it dries up a little bit. But yeah, what a different environment. Completely different soils. I know that northern KwaZulu-Natal also had a massive amount of wet weather this year. Lots and lots of rain. Even quite late into the season. Still lots and lots of good food around. It's amazing to see this contrast between the different habitats, just to give us a bit of an idea of the different type of environments that wild animals adapt to and have to deal with. Like, it's always very, very interesting how things like the soil, the different plants in the region, the location, and with location I mean especially proximity from the oceans, how that affects the climate and therefore everything else within the system, and the animals that have to adapt to it. Now I can see there's quite a bit of elephant dung on the edge, so the elephants still come down regularly. One thing about these areas in northern KwaZulu-Natal is they are extremely humid, So even though it might not be as dry this time of the year, it's still very, 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 very hot there. Nina, where would one go in South Africa if they want to see black impala? So, from what I understand, Nina, is black impala is not something that really occurs out in the wild often. There are certainly cases of it, and that's where initially the genes would have been got from, and then mostly they were bred for color variants, for game traders and game breeders. And on the game trading market, these color variants often bring about quite good prices. But out in the wild, I don't know. In South Africa especially, I know some of the breeding farms out in the central part and in the northwest, and even in the northern part of the country, you might find some of the smaller breeding farms that have them. But out in national parks or some of the tourist attraction places, it's not necessarily a creature that's commonly seen. I'll have to look into it to make sure. I'm not 100% sure if there might be any that you can see out in the wild, but as far as my knowledge goes, they are usually bred for their specific color variants. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. It's good to be back. It's good to get to experience all of these new and exciting places. The Tembe Elephant Park is a very, very interesting place, and I've only had the privilege of going there once before. Excellent birding place, unbelievable. And then, of course, well known for its elephant population and some pretty impressive specimens. Often find elephants with very, very large tusks in those areas. And something I found quite interesting is there's also, the area is known for its sand forests, and so it's quite a unique, very ancient type of habitat. And I remember reading a while back when Europeans initially started moving into South Africa, especially from the Durban side, elephants were rife all over that part of KwaZulu-Natal, and with the Europeans bringing in their advanced weapons and the ivory trade being quite prominent at the time, and I'm talking about very, very early here. This would be the late 1700s and early 1800s. The elephants were prosecuted, and they were not used to the hunters at all. They've never seen them before, so most of the elephants further down south in KwaZulu-Natal were kind of chased north in a way, and some of the last surviving populations were actually the ones that didn't move up further north, but that existed in those areas. They were hiding away in the dense sand forests, which was very, very tricky to get into due to conditions and climate, and played a vital role, this area, in the protection of the elephant within these areas. You can see there's one impala laying down, usually a sign that it's quite peaceful in the area. I guess there's enough animals around to look out for danger. but also no horns, so a female. And I can see that these animals look in a really, really good condition. You can see gleaming coats. Their fur is very, very colorful. And for this time of the year, this time of the season, something you not usually see out in the bushveld. They usually look a little bit scrawnier, but I guess with all the good food around in this area, it's perfect for them to keep up their condition. I can see some rounded bellies, and some of these females must be pregnant currently, as we're approaching November, usually November, December, the time when they give birth. Interesting here, the one standing up, you can see the ears facing out, usually listening for anything. There's a slight breeze going. Actually a little bit stronger than I thought initially. But both of these impalas are just ruminating. You can see the bottom jaws moving almost in a slight circular motion. Making sure to grind up grass that they've eaten previously fine into small little balls. Interesting way of digestion, very effective. Helps them to feed whenever they can, and then at a later stage properly process their food and gain maximum nutrition from it. But in a way it's also quite a good way for these animals to, when they're in a situation like this where they need a little bit of rest or they can lay down, and it also helps them to have a look out and just be a little bit more alert for any danger, especially with the wind now, the thick bush in the area. This often helps them to make sure that there's no danger around. When the wind's going like this, it kind of masks other senses of the animals. The hearing, which is normally very acute, everything's moving, so it would be difficult to spot a extremely still and stealthy predator using the thick bush for camouflage. Now this impala laying down, for a moment there she stopped, which meant she would have just swallowed the cud. The cud is the ball of regurgitated food or grass, plant material that they keep chewing and masticating it. They just add a little bit more saliva. So every now and again there's a pause. You can see she's just stopped again. And if one, oh, you actually saw it quite clearly there, but if you look carefully you can see the ball go up and down the throat. Looks like some of the other impala have moved away. Hannah, what a good question. Do they ever regurgitate food to the young? So they don't normally. Young impala are actually quite adept. They start eating most of the young antelopes start eating quite early on, but there is a phase at the start where they mainly drink milk from their mother, and that will sustain them up until such an age that they can start to feed for themselves, which is usually quite early on. It depends on the species, but they don't regurgitate any food to their young. They only feed them, so the food that they take in obviously providing them the energy and nutrition to produce the milk the young will then drink while suckling from them. So the only regurgitation that happens is for them to chew their cud while they're ruminating. I've been looking for a long time and I wasn't sure if it was a bird sitting on the impala's ear or something else, and I can see now it looks like it's just a deformity. I wonder what happened. So what I find quite interesting about these things on the animal's ears, like little growths, little nicks, it's often a scar that tells a tale of something that might have happened. Now in this case, being an ear, quite a thin piece of skin, and the animal runs away from danger, or when they get their head stuck somewhere, they can often tear their ears, but in this case it looks sufficiently deformed, so I'm not sure what might have happened. It might have even been an attempt by a predator on the impala's life at some stage. Doesn't look recent, looks like it's healed up properly, and the animal doesn't seem too bothered. I guess the two little folds there, probably within the wind blowing as it is, probably gives her a little bit of an irritation, but I don't think much more than that. So Victoria, what is the cause of females having horns? It depends. I've often find it these type of things, like I guess at best there's a lot of ways that one can look at the evolution of the species and what would be the driving factors to drive the development of a aspect like a horn, for instance. I think horns can serve a number of functions. It can be either for protection or for defense, or for the fighting. So I think to answer your question is, what I've noticed is it's often with the larger antelope species and ungulates that you have both the male and female have the horns, where with the smaller antelopes, like the impala in this case that we're seeing here, you can see all of these females, they don't have horns. Even though it's not completely unheard of, there are some cases where some hormonal imbalances causes some females to develop horns later or in life. They're often deformed and they're not quite as well formed for the same function as the males. But what I find interesting is that the horns are there for protection for the females mainly, and that's why there's usually a big difference in terms of the size sometimes even the shapes of the female's horns versus the male's horns. So with females, the larger the animal, often they get predated on by creatures like the lion. Let's take, for instance, a very large antelope like a kudu. Kudu females don't have horns, only the males have horns. But once you go up from a kudu and you go to an eland where both male and female have horns, then you might find that they become very rewarding meals. And when I say rewarding, I mean the amount of energy that the predator has to put in to take down such an animal versus the amount of energy that they receive back from the food that they eat. And it balances out quite well. Even with buffalo, for lion for instance, lion often takes buffalo cows and buffalo bulls, but the buffalo cow is also a good meal. It can feed a pride of lions, so it's a lot of meat, and for that they need the horns for protection, because they might have a situation where the large predators go after them, where the small, with larger predators going after them, get attacked, they'll still get predated on, but the females don't necessarily need the horns, because the production of horns, it comes at a cost. It also takes energy. It means they'll need a lot more muscle mass, a thicker neck in order to carry that extra weight, and where it doesn't really provide them sufficient protection against something like a lion, for instance, or a clan of hyenas, they might as well lose that adaptation from an evolutionary point of view. Where the males, they still compete, and they need to compete for mating rights, for a space to have access to females to mate. So often you'll find that the males keep the horns because that's part of the competition. You can see quite a lot of beautiful green trees, big trees around this area. You can see the impala stopped right on the edges there. It's almost like the game parts there looks a little bit greener. Oh, well, these impalas continue their peaceful feeding here. I think we'll head over to Tau Lodge to see what's happening there. It looks like one elephant's still in the water. And if I'm not mistaken, it looks like he's actually feeding. Well, that's best of both worlds. You can see the other three, the group of 3 elephants is still in the area as well. Looks like the one female's taking a dust bath while the little one's taking a rest. Well, while we're looking at these elephants, just a reminder that we'll have a threatened species fireside chat on the 25th of September. Species that will be discussed will be animals like lions, elephants, wild dogs, and we'll chat about some of the challenges they face and the current conservation landscape regarding these species. It'll be at 7 Central African time, and it's only for explorers and members. Oh, sorry, just a correction there. It's not for September. It's the 25th of August. So in 3 days' time. 3 days' time. Yeah. Apologies for that. There's a few more elephants that join. This is quite interesting. Now, you can see this elephant closer to us has got quite a bit of red. Looks almost like a reddish color on its back and on its ears and the top of its head. And being a younger elephant, it's also a little bit more adventurous. Looks like a young male from what I can see. So he's wandered off from the rest of the group. And you can see he's struggling a bit more in that thick mud there. And then when you look at the back there, that tiny elephant is throwing some very white soil over it. And giving himself a good shake to get rid of the excess. So now, of course, after they've covered mud, which should have certainly cooled them down, they've got these thick, wrinkly skins. We can see this elephant closest to us. You can clearly see how some of the mud, the parts that's dried out, and then the wetter parts that's still within the wrinkles. So it makes the wrinkles quite apparent. Now, one of the theories is that the very wrinkly skin enlarges the surface area of the skin, meaning that there's a larger amount of skin that can hold mud to cool down. Like the creases within the skin, often the mud that gets stuck in there isn't directly exposed to the sun, so it helps keeping the animal cooler for longer. And then what they do is they kind of add almost as an extra measure, almost like a sunscreen, they add loose soil on top of that. So the loose soil not only protects them by placing particles between the sun's rays and the skin, but it also cakes the mud. So the drier outer layer, which gets the sun, doesn't dry out all of the mud immediately, because some of the mud still stays wet for a little while longer. As you can see, this bull completely covered in mud, and he might do the same in a little while. It looks like the little bird in front of him, which, if I'm not mistaken, is that black crake, has got a bit of a limp. I wonder what happened there. Maybe he's just got so much mud stuck to its feet. Amazon, I fully agree. There's some beautiful elephants at Tao. Some very large specimens, lots of little ones. And elephants are some of my favorite creatures. Always active. And look at this elephant. So it's standing near the muddy patches. But it just stretches out a little further and grabs the water. It's drinkable, not as muddy. What an incredible creature. I wonder what it got there. Maybe a small pole of succulent grass. I always find it amazing with these elephants, like when they walk like this, you can see the tip of the trunk is just above the ground, moving around. They seem like they're not really paying attention to what's going on around them and that they're just casually moving through, but they've got such an incredible sense of smell and such a wealth of knowledge of what they need to eat and what they can eat. And I find it amazing when you watch a group of elephants moving through a open space. Like they'll often randomly stop in a middle of a barren space and grab something from the ground or dig something out. Oh, there's an impala ram that's just come in. He's come to eat on some of the green grass. I don't think he's come down for a wallow. And judging by the size of his horns, this is probably a nice mature male that would have certainly had the chance during the rut season to mate with a few females. That's maybe why he's here this time of the day, even though it's very hot. I often find impalas might come later in the morning and then earlier in the afternoon to come and have a drink. Often that you see them near the water in the middle of the day, unless the area that they choose to feed or their general home range area is close to water. You can see he's just gobbling up whatever short grass he can find there as much as possible. And later on, when he moves away from the water's edge and he's got a nice quiet little spot, that's when he might lay down and ruminate. But I am very impressed. Ooh, that looks like a moorhen. Oh, it looks like a common moorhen. Look at those large feet. You can see all the mud around there. Now for a bird to be stepping, oh, there comes another one with quite a awkward little jog. Might be another male chasing one out of its spot. Fascinating birds. Very long toes. It just helps them stay on top of the muddy sections. Ray, I do keep a bird list. I definitely do keep a bird list. I think almost all guides or naturalists keep a bird list. It's an essential part of what we need to do, and birds are fascinating as well. I think just from a interest point of view, I keep a list. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to go look for certain local birds, at least, but certainly when I travel, I will try and see as much of the birds found in specific areas as I can. But my current list, I'm not even sure what my current list are on. It's not extremely impressive for the Southern African region, but I guess there's a lot of birds that we do see on a daily basis that I don't always count, or sometimes I forget to count them. So these two moorhens are picking off something on the water's edge. See that bright red saddle on the forehead. What a beautiful bird. And the zebra is inching closer. Here we've got a blacksmith lapwing. Looks like the lapwings are moving on the slightly harder ground, judging from the scarce small puddles of water there. It looks like it's slightly harder than where the mud at the back where the moorhens were moving, where the elephants churned it up. Also quite an attractive bird. And then we have a three-banded plover. What a beautiful little bird. They always move so quickly. I can imagine a little creature that size must have very, very fast metabolism. So it needs a lot of energy. So you almost constantly need to forage. And then of course flying. Not even to mention flying. I can see some insects moving about on the water surface, and I'm pretty sure that's what these two are going after currently. You can see that little plover was moving very, very quickly. Now I can see some elephants moving away in the background. The zebras have moved closer, almost giving the elephants to leaving the watering hole for the elephants to have their fun and do what they need to before they come down. There's some elephants still. Jackie, what's the one place you'd love to go for the purpose of birding? Oof, I don't know. That's a very, very difficult question. I think locally, I guess there's so many spots. It's very difficult to pick out one particular spot, but I have to say I do like northern KwaZulu-Natal when it comes to birding. It's got such an amazing variety, especially the area around Tembe. Some very, very unique birds there. But otherwise, an area I haven't been to, which I've heard amazing things about, is the Eastern Highlands in Zimbabwe. There's a lot of very unique birds found there and in central Mozambique. So I would love to see some of the birds in those areas. And then in the world, I don't know. I think there would be so many spots to go to. So many that I'm not even aware of. I know Central and Southern America, some fascinating birds. And of course, some of the more strange creatures on New Zealand. I would love to go see some of the birds there. Shiv, this is quite interesting topic to discuss, but the crocodile moving out of the water and how far they would move to find new water once their sources dried up is I guess it depends on the area. Crocodile is depending on the size of the croc, the age, but they are known to travel quite far. And amazingly, in the past, I've found crocodiles out in the middle of a clearing, quite far away from water, several kilometers actually. Mind you, every time that's happened usually on the day that the weather was of such they could travel. It was a little bit more overcast. It was earlier in the morning or later in the afternoon. It was never during the middle of the day out in full sun. But they can travel quite far. I mean, a couple of kilometers. I know in one of the reserves that I worked a few years ago, there were two watering holes that were at least 3 or 4 kilometers apart, and it's the one being the only source where I could think the crocs would come from nearby, and they travel to the watering hole on the reserve where I worked. So they can go quite a bit of distance. To be honest, I don't know if there's any record set for that. That would be an interesting thing to research. But moving at nighttime, taking it slowly, I guess they can cover quite a bit of kilometers if they need to. But to put an exact number to it would be difficult to say. I guess it depends on the circumstances. The crocodiles are indeed very, very interesting animals and a lot more active than what people give them credit for. They're often regarded as these very lazy animals that lay out on the banks during the day, and at night time they wait for any unsuspecting creatures to come to the water's edge. But I've been fortunate enough to work in places near large rivers with lots of crocs, and what I often find is they have quite an interesting social structure, with larger males being quite territorial and dominant, and that territory can stretch. Like, I remember finding one crocodile like up the river. So he used to be found in a pool near a confluence with another river quite regularly, and he was quite easily identifiable due to a large scar on his upper jaw. And within a couple of days, like 3 or 4 days, I saw that same crocodile up the river at least 10, 12 kilometers from the pool that I saw him in previously. And when I saw him there, only afterwards did I realize that there was a dead nyala on the bank of the river. And obviously, when an animal dies in the water, the scent travels down with the river, and this croc must have picked up on that and then moved up along the river to go see where the carcass was. And sometimes you don't see crocodiles in a certain stretch of the river, and you don't know of any crocs that might be in the nearby area. And then when a large animal passes away in the river, then suddenly crocodiles from everywhere show up. So they are in general quite busy. They move quite a bit if they need to. Lorraine, that's a good question. Why is the one zebra a little bit more brown? Very likely because of the dust. I know these zebras, they are referred to or known as plains zebra, formerly the Birchall zebra. Now, depending on the population and the specific genetic pool that they come from, some of them do have a little bit more brown or beige color within them. Some of them even have like a brownish stripe in between the black stripes, which we refer to as shadow stripes. And they could add to a number of things, but probably for a bit of camouflage. But they certainly do dust bathe quite a lot to help them treat parasites. And you often find very soft, dusty patches where zebras have all laid down and they roll on their backs and they cover themselves. And there we go. There, right there, there's a crocodile out in the open. Judging from the color, it looks like he's just climbed out of the water. That's amazing. The crocodile. You can never assume they're not there. I can see his back seems to be blending in quite a bit and on the head, so I'm assuming that might be mud. He was probably hidden quite well underneath this thick mud. Even looks like he's missing a tail tip from where I am. Yeah, fascinating creatures. Just endured through time. Now, it looks like it's very hot there, so I'm assuming it spend as much time in the mud there as possible. Maybe it was hoping for something, for a chance to get at something. But it'll heat up quite quickly now out in the open, and each of those little, you can see the scales quite clearly, like nice little almost block shaped formations all over the body. Now they're all, especially the ones at the top, they're covered in this, it's got a bony piece within the skin, and those kind of act almost like little solar panels. So while the animal's laying there, the heat kind of spreads evenly throughout the body, and those little bone pieces keep the heat. Yeah, with the crocodile being a reptile, it needs to regulate its own body temperature. So once the sun heats it up to a point where it's too hot, then it might first open its mouth, start and release some heat, and then might move back into the water. Joan, crocodiles are like vultures. They do scavenge, they do clean up, but they're also active hunters. They also hunt larger prey, especially larger crocodiles, for any predator. Scavenging and taking on already dead animals is an opportunity that they cannot let go to waste. But they certainly do play a valuable ecological role in removing the sick or injured animals from the system, as well as cleaning up any dead or dying animals. Ooh, something spooked the animals, but I think as they move off, let's head over to Tembi. Let's see what's happening there. Amazing. Here we've got some of the famous Tembi elephants, and you can see a bit of interaction going here. Now this is quite fascinating actually. Now by the looks of it, these look like a group of younger bull elephants. If I'm taking a guess here, I can't say 100% for sure. At least those three look like younger ones. I think it's safe to assume. So this would be a group of those animals that's left their natal herds. They form these little groups, usually accompanying a larger bull elephant like this one walking in now. You can see naturally they give way. Even that elephant still looks relatively young, not ancient. And we can clearly see by the way the younger ones moved out of the way. This elephant probably has a little bit of a more senior rank within this group. And that's what the young ones are doing in the background, pushing each other around like that. they kind of establish this hierarchy or social standing through their play and constantly pushing each other around. You often see the young bulls playing up and down like that. Now it's nothing serious, they're not intending to hurt each other. I mean, they could potentially, but the aim here is just to flex a bit, to exercise, and over a longer term establish some sort of a hierarchy. We can see it's another nice bull elephant that's walked into the picture, and those two elephants have very, very impressive tusks. In fact, all of these elephants, even the younger ones, although they comparatively quite small, quite long, especially if you compare this to elephants found in other regions. These tusks are incredibly well developed, and I'm assuming that that's also because of a genetic pool that these elephants come from, where these must have been the last of the remaining tuskers. And the Tembe elephants are well known for having very impressive tusks, some of them. I mean, it's also a very, very fertile area, and over many, many years that could have contributed to tusk growth and getting all the right nutrients. You can see the two, look like the two smallest ones are now pushing each other back and forth there. It looks like that elephant on the right really wants to get involved. Just staying out, just. And one of those youngsters also have quite long tusks, which for an elephant that age is very impressive. Now, when I see them push each other like this, I often wonder how they manage not to hurt each other. Even though it doesn't look like it, they do play quite gentle. They're quite conscious of what's happening, and they're quite sensitive to the other animal as well. Dylan, elephants do have a hierarchy when it comes to drinking at watering holes, and generally, like within other spheres of the natural world, it's the largest animal usually has the right of way. However, you find sometimes when it comes to a herd structure, or if there is a limited amount of surface water in an area, then the animals kind of, after spending time in the area, kind of notice the movements of the others, and they will try and time their approach to watering holes in a manner that they can give the others their chance to drink. And what happens sometimes, what I've noticed, is that it's not necessarily a hierarchy of the one herd being able or allowed to drink before the others. It's more a case of when the one arrives before the others will hang back a little bit and give them their chance to drink. But in this case, where we have these young bulls and the older bulls, the younger ones will definitely make space for the older ones to drink, should there be a good spot along the edge of the waterhole to drink from. And in that case, that would purely be determined by age and size. What I've also noticed is elephant bulls go into this hormonal state called must, which is usually a very, very chaotic time in their lives where they move around. They'll look for females to mate with, and when they come down to the water's edge, often sometimes, especially younger bulls, they don't tend to stay long or drink long, and then if there are any elephants around, then the elephants would move out of the way so that that animal can come down and drink. And then I've also watched some very old, oh well, there we go. You can see there clearly that bigger elephant have now moved the two younger ones off. Pushing them away a little bit. I think it might have more been of a little bit of a playful intent, but also not. Also just telling them to know their place. It's a good, looks like a good dusting spot that. You can see from the dung standing there, it's probably in the shade some point during the day. From the disturbance caused there, it's probably a spot that gets used to dust himself regularly after drinking. Maybe that elephant did not want to share that with the younger ones. But what an incredible scene. I can see from some of the larger trees in the back, it looks like the wind is blowing relatively strong. It also looks a little bit overcast. So on overcast days, often I've seen where there's sufficient deep water sources. The elephant bulls would often wade into the water and even take a dip or swim. But seems to, at least from my experience, seems to mud bath a little bit less on days like this, and they often use the dust in this case just to cover their heads back down the rump. So even though it might not be as hot, the sun's rays are still very lethal in overcast days, so they still need to protect their skin. And yes, even an elephant needs to protect its skin. We can see all the elephant's tails wagging or going side to side. To me, when there's a group together like that, it's usually a sign of interacting. Even though they're not physically interacting directly, they're definitely paying attention to each other. Maybe this one here at the back, if you're thinking, when is this elephant in the dust bull gonna move off? And that one is probably paying attention to the other younger ones, watching what they're doing. Maybe he wants to get involved with their games, but knows that they will move off the moment he moves forward. Oh, there's another elephant coming. Another two. Interesting, this elephant looks like he's got much smaller tusks. You can see the other elephant is still staying back, giving him his chance to drink. Well, while we leave this elephant bull to drink here, we'll head over to the African at Kamaratani and see what's happening over there. Oh wow, more elephants. That's amazing. By the looks of it, these elephants don't look like they've seen water before this watering hole. And it's interesting to notice here we've got a different color in the water due to the soil and the mud. And now you can clearly see as these elephants are drinking and mud bathing, you can see how the grayer mud is affecting the color of the water around the area that they're drinking. And this is what we don't often notice around watering holes, and we don't often get a clear view of this, especially with that elephant, that young elephant. You can see it clearly, but that's what some elephants coming in to drink initially try to avoid, is that muddied up water with all the mud and soil particles within the water. So they try and move away a little bit further from that to get to the cleaner water where the sediment is settled. But in this case, I think these elephants are just so relieved to be in the water. Oh, look at that. Going in for a full dip. Here comes another one. That one elephant at the back is completely down flat. And the little one on the left is going completely berserk. I find it very, very interesting and funny to watch when they are at water, especially if they've been waiting, because often it's the older females. They're the ones that determine when to move, where to move to, also kind of time the periods between when they're actually going to go drink and when not. So when the little ones get to the water, it's a complete flurry of emotions and excitement and renewed energy. Yeah, Adam, indeed, these elephants definitely know how to have a good time. I think if, especially the young elephants, having a good time is is what's mostly occupying their time around the watering hole. And for animals that don't always have direct, immediate access to their resources, and water being a major resource and an important part of the daily lives of elephants, we find that they do kind of, especially with younger ones, when the heat's overbearing and they've moved long distances, then it becomes stressful, and that stress of not knowing exactly when or where the next watering hole is, it can affect the animal. It can affect their behavior. So once they do actually reach the water, it's kind of like a moment of salvation. And also a brief period of relief. See, these elephants are covering themselves very well with this mud, making sure to get to all the crevices, the space below the belly, on the chest. Those parts will dry out more slowly, so it'll keep them cooler for longer. And the spaces behind the ears, where the thinner skin is more of a, provides a opportunity to directly cool down the blood that moves through the ears. And if I remember correctly, it's something stupid like about 12 liters of blood every minute traveling through an adult elephant's ear. So you can imagine the cool mud behind the ears, not directly exposing to the mud, to the sun. They keep it cool there, so whatever blood comes that's warmed through the body, moving through that space, cools down, and then that cool blood goes back into the body, and overall regulating the elephant's body temperature slightly by bringing it down a little bit. Then again, also, the mud serves not just to cool down, but also to protect their skin and to manage parasites. And parasites, I'm referring here to the external skin parasites, specifically ticks. And yes, ticks even manage to get to elephants in the hard to reach parts below the body and in the folds between the legs. Those are the spots where the ticks generally find a spot to hold on to and access the elephant's blood supply. So by covering that properly in mud, that also helps, prevents them from just attaching themselves or easily latching on, because as the elephants move through the tall grass, the ticks sit out on the grass stems, and as the animal or the elephant passes by and over, it will often just jump onto the animal and then attach itself there. So with a thick layer of mud being between the skin and the tick, that often complicates things for the parasite. And then of course, as the elephant scratches itself, whatever parasites are there already hardens in the dried mud and they can get rid of them. That's quite funny. That little elephant got a little bit irritated by, I think it's an Egyptian goose I'm seeing there in a blacksmith lapwing. Oh no, it's a hammerkop. The hammerkop isn't too bothered. I'm sure it's had one or two interactions with young elephants around the water's edge. Well, while these elephants cool down for the rest of the afternoon, let's head over to Onguma, where we have some lions. And just look at them. What a dramatic change in landscape. And strategy for cooling down. Perfectly placed, well hidden in the shade. What an arid landscape. Oof, beautiful. You can see in the distance there, it's very dry there currently. And of course, this little water would be essential to any animal in this area. Hence the reason why these two, by the looks of it, lionesses are nestled perfectly in the shade. You can see some heavy breathing there. Ears are down. It looks like they're almost dozing off every now and again. Jive bunny indeed. What a lovely sighting in Namibia. This is incredible. Two lionesses, perfectly utilizing not only their camouflage, so not only their physical characteristics, but also the environment. Best possible spot to set up an ambush. Now I can see it's very hot there, and of course that's why they're in the shade. It will cool them down quite a bit. But it is, I find it a little bit interesting that they are still up with their heads. They're constantly looking around. I'm sure they, oh, there we go. And that was exactly what I wanted to see and what I was wondering about. It looks like that belly is slightly rounded. In fact, it looks like both those bellies are slightly rounded. So I think if I had to take a guess, and I thought I saw a little bit of a like a pinkish color around the face of the one on the right. I think these two females had something to eat. Not sure how long ago, maybe not right now, but either during the night or even the day before. And that's why they've come to this watering hole. Easily to drink whenever they need to. Now, these animals do utilize water perfectly like that. Lions don't necessarily have to drink a lot, but after a meal, they will spend time near watering holes. And then they do very, very little during the day if it's hot. And they try to be as invisible as possible. Free Spirit, I do not know how far this watering hole is from Ukukuyo. I am not 100% sure. I will have to look into that. Now, it's interesting to note these thorn trees provide a perfect little island of solitude in the heat of the day out here in northern Namibia. Still have foliage. It's a nice and dense canopy, so very little sun that comes through. And interesting to see that they've chosen the tree at the back. Now I think that's purely just out of from a more of a perspective point of view. You've got a better view from there. Still provides ample shade. The other tree also looks pushed over. I'm pretty sure an elephant had a hand in that. There is a bird, looks like a hornbill, out in the open, but other than that I don't see too much other creatures in the area. And it's quite a bit of water, quite substantial water. It looks like I mean, it's not a massive amount, but more than enough to sustain creatures within the area. And what a view. Oh, there we go. There's some animals in the distance. By the looks of it, some zebra. No, I'm pretty sure the layer of grey dry bush between these lions and those zebras makes it impossible for lions to see them outside. You can see the lions are ready for anything that might approach, facing opposite directions. And unlike the lions, the zebras are out in the sun. But it's always interesting to know that, I mean, it's quite a distance away, but even at this distance, the change in habitat always provides this ever dynamic landscape where there's always something around every corner. And the zebras don't look bothered at this stage. Well, thank you, Mercedes Bean. Very, very good to know. So it is quite close to Okukuyo. Well, Jive Bunny, I see you say it's 155 kilometers away. That's quite far away. So I'm not too sure. I'm gonna have to go have a look at that and familiarize myself with a general lay of the land there. So yeah, not so close indeed. This is quite interesting. In this landscape, often these trees, the pushed over ones especially, they provide quite good cover for smaller creatures that might hide up in them during the day. Smaller cats, like the African wild cat, birds hiding from the heat of the day. I find this amazing. And this is also just as a general reminder of how harsh these environments can be that these animals live in. Even these two lionesses look like they might have had something to eat relatively recently, they're still constantly alert. They know these watering holes provide very, very essential water to the animals coming to drink, and therefore for them as a predator, excellent opportunities. And that's what they need to be. They always need to be the ever present opportunist Any chance it might come their way, they'll have to take. Can never be too sure when the next meal will come from or where it will come from. And that's why they also gorge themselves to the point where they can be quite uncomfortable for a day or two afterwards, sometimes even longer. And I think that's what initially drew my attention to the fact that they might have eaten something. It's just, they looked a little bit restless. Full bellies would make it difficult to breathe. It would take a lot of energy to digest. And that's why during the heat of the day they have these intermittent naps. It's not really a sufficient period of sleep. And with lion, I know there's often said that lions sleep for about 20 hours a day. They certainly rest for very long or extended periods of time during the day, depending on what the conditions are. But they take very little short naps in between, and it's tough for them in the heat of the day, especially when they're full, to sleep properly. And often a big part of it is, even though they're laying down, it's more so to rest than anything else. To physically get some rest, but not necessarily sleeping. So they're always still alert. And I'm sure tonight, once it cools down, they might sleep a little bit longer or get a proper nap in before they go about their business of the evening. But yo, what an incredible afternoon with some incredible elephant sightings along the different watering holes, some good birding, even a crocodile made its appearance. And then to end it off with these two beautiful lionesses relaxing in the shade. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll all see you all tomorrow afternoon.
Well, a very good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this, not a beautiful Thursday afternoon, a very, very windy and gusty afternoon, coming directly from Djuma Private Game Reserve in the northern Asabi Sands. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cedric, and behind the camera with me we've got Bertus. So, yes, it is windy, it is cloudy, it is pretty miserable.